Good morning and welcome back to another episode of Stirring the Pot and Lighting 2024 on Fire. I am Colleen, this is Cory, and we're going to talk about some stuff today. So before we jumped on here, we were kind of what'd you call it? Like idea soup or
Brain stew.
brain stew. Yes, we were making a brain stew of just dumping a little bit of a vent sesh about our last week, what we've been noticing in these first, which I can't even believe, 45 days of 2024. We've made it past the first 45. And we wound up to this place of starting to have this conversation about like busy versus productive. And as coaches, people who have or are still working the 9 to 5, and also now entrepreneurs, there's a real big difference between being busy versus being productive. So I want to just kind of start us off with, what does it look like for each of us, right? Like you and I, what does it look like when you're being busy versus productive? And what, if anything, do you do when you realize you're in one and you'd rather be in the other?
So with I I've talked about this before. I am the ultimate procrastinator, and that is by far my biggest weakness as a human. And so, when you procrastinate long enough, then it forces you at some point to have to be productive instead of busy, right? Because, and in college, this was the best example, and I know a lot of people that listen to this can relate. It was, oh, I got a paper due, or I got to have this project done in a month. And, you just keep blowing it off. You blow it off. You blow it off. Oh, I'm too busy. I can't do it right now. Well, then the night before, you just fucking make time and get it busted out. Like, that's just what you do. Or you don't. Like, sometimes there was that too. Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is I think when we don't have something, it's not important yet, or it's not a priority quite yet, then it's easy to find things to keep us what we would consider busy. It's like, oh, you know what? Like what I do personally, this is fucked up. What I will do is I will there's tasks that supposed to having I've been supposed to, oh my God, tasks that I should have done weeks ago, days ago, and I will procrastinate on those. And then when something becomes somewhat important, then I'll start doing those old tasks first. I'm like, oh, you know what? I forgot to do this. I need to do this. So I start picking off the shit that's like not as bad
Mhm.
and continuing to procrastinate on the thing that would be most productive. And so that being said, that busy work that we find as people is just more procrastination. That's what it is. It's the ability to continue putting off what you know has to be done until the very last minute when it just has to be done. Instead of being more proactive and taking that initiative to attack the things that you know are going to help you move towards those goals instead of going through the motions of being busy and just doing these menial tasks all day long.
Mhm. Yeah. I while you were talking, per usual, there's always things that I'm like, oh yeah, I do that too. But then I'll be thinking, I'm like, oh, how it shows up for me, right? And so I started making notes. When I'm busy, or if I'm getting distracted, as you said, from the things that long term are important to me, some things that I notice I do, and it's really things that I don't do. I stop making appointments. I find myself needing to like rush through everything. Everything has to happen right now. We're late for everything. I'm like yelling at the kids. It's a tornado in the house trying to like get all the people to get dressed, get their stuff. What do you mean, Evie? It's Friday morning at 6 a.m. and your homework is not done. And then I feel like the worst parent in the whole world because we made it through the whole week of me not knowing that our homework wasn't getting done. But little Miss Sassy Pants is for sure on like level whatever in Zelda at this point on her Nintendo. So it's like, oh my God, what did I do? Super busy rushing. And then I find myself like needing favors. Case in point, So this is how current this is for me, that I've been dealing with this bullshit. Self-induced, by the way. So yesterday I go to pick up Evie. Her school had a minimum day, which is also crazy leading into this 3-day weekend. Minimum day, I was picking up her and our neighbor that we carpool with. Georgia was with me because TK is already a half day. So we're just trotting on campus. And we had a few minutes to kill. So I was like, Georgie, let's go into the office. Mommy needs to sign a paper so that I can request what class you're going to be in next year for kindergarten. Meanwhile, they sent this information to us. Number one, you can sign up online. You're supposed to do that. You're also supposed to turn in the hard copy portion of it. Haven't done that. Like, it's been a shit show in our house. Haven't done it. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go into the office where I'm super tight with all these ladies and be like, hey, can you do me a solid? Which I did. I said, can I have an extra copy of that fun little paper where I tell you that I want Georgia to be an AM kinder next year? And they literally had to go find the original packet that they made the copies from, tear it off. There's a staple hole in the corner. I start filling it out. I'm writing Evie's name down, not George's name. I have to scribble that out, finally get it filled out, and then hand it back to one of the gals in the office. But it's just like, this is how I know. I'm rushing through everything. Everything has become important because I didn't have clarity. I didn't hold myself accountable to the energy level that I needed to have to just get the stuff done so that I'm not procrastinating. And it does, like the blink of an eye, it just builds up. And then you find yourself so freaking frustrated and mad at yourself. Like, I know better. I coach people through this stuff all the time. I'm so good at coaching other people. And then somehow am I letting myself off the hook? Am I just getting like, am I being stupid, Colleen? Like, what's happening? But I have noticed that very much in this last like week and a half, especially. And I also wrote down, as you were talking about that difference between busy versus productive and how procrastination shows up for you. For me, the way that I feel it, it's like when I start procrastinating, whether it's little or big tasks, it doesn't matter. But once I start procrastinating, it makes every day busy, right? As opposed to like, oh, maybe once in a while I have a busy day because there's just multiple things planned on that same day, as opposed to it's busy because I'm not accomplishing anything. And so then I'm constantly pushing it 1 hour to the next, one day to the next, right? And then it's busy all the time. I also really liked something you said in terms of procrastinating, that you're pushing off the things because they're not important to you or they're not important enough to you yet, right? And then by procrastinating, we make them important. And now all of a sudden it's like deserving of our time to do. I think it's very interesting. Are there any follow-up question? Are there any things that you notice yourself doing that kind of bring you back into focus? Like, whoa, holy shit, we need to like get control over this. Like, what are your signs that you realize you're in busy mode versus productive? And then what do you do to like correct yourself?
Well, going back a couple weeks to our habits and rituals and routines episode, that's probably the thing that keeps me most on track, is knowing that most of my days are going to look the same, at least in the morning piece. And and to execute on those tasks, it already takes a lot of energy, right? And so you kind of feel this sense of, I don't know, I've been doing it a long time now, so it's not as hard as it was before to try and convince myself that this is going to better me because I've seen results in doing it. Um, so having that as like a look at these other things that you've done, dude, and like, now you're drifting. Your brain is starting to drift. And when you drift, that's when shitty thoughts come in. That's when you're scrolling on Instagram. That's when you're just being unproductive. And to be honest, I mean, there's a totally different segment of this whole conversation, which is time. Like, time is by far the most valuable currency that any of us have. Most would argue that money is, well, yeah, we need money to survive. Being in debt's a shitty thing. Trust me. It's not fun. But that time piece, are we using it wisely or are we using it to drift? And when you're letting your brain drift, you're allowing for again, those other things to come in, and it's just completely unproductive and unuseful thoughts and ideas instead of finding a way to channel your energy into focusing on getting something done. And it's really hard to do that. It's really hard to bring yourself back to that. Myself, that's probably again one of the things I struggle with the most is my grandmother used to call me mañana. Like if you don't know Spanish, I know most of the bad words in Spanish. I'm not fluent, but mañana means tomorrow. She used to call me tomorrow. Honey, can you do this for me? I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do it tomorrow. And to her, that meant, well, it's not going to get done. But she's like, "Oh yeah, that's what you always say, mañana. That's your new nickname," which was kind of funny. But it's again, things don't become important until it's like right now, and then you all of a sudden get productive. And I
Mhm.
think I can't remember if I mentioned this on when we were recording a different episode, but I think it was Elon Musk said, if you have 30 days to clean your house, it's going to take you 30 days, and if you have 24 hours to clean your house, it's going to take you 24 hours. Like
Yep.
it's it's the truth.
Mhm.
It's how much could we get done in a 30-day time period if
Mhm.
we were actually productive and intentional, like you were saying,
Yep.
trying to fill out that paperwork
Yep.
for Georgia to go to kindergarten or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Like that whole situation, the clarity in your mind, everything was foggy because you're fucking under the gun at this point. You've procrastinated or maybe things have gone just wild, right? And so now your brain has all these different things going on through it, and you feel busy, you feel overwhelmed. It's hard to be intentional in anything that you do. Now you're stressed out, you're anxious, you're frustrated, you're scared that you're not going to be able to achieve or get these tasks done. And it's like, how did I get here?
Mhm.
What steps could I have taken to not even have come close to being in this position? But
Yeah.
yet I do it every fucking time. Like more days than not, I'm rushing to get out the door to make it to work on time. I have a 25, 30-minute commute. The other day I needed to get fuel. I could have got fuel the day before. I didn't. So
Mhm.
I'm fucking running on empty
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
hoping I have enough to make it to work.
Mhm.
And I'm getting ready to go give my wife and my baby a kiss so I can leave. My wife goes, "Hey, can you change her diaper?" And I just fucking I have to get fuel. I don't have time for this, blah, blah, blah. And just like, poor me, poor me, poor me. Just throwing a fucking bitch fit. Taking it out on her and taking it out on my 5-month-old baby.
Yeah.
I had nobody to blame but myself. It was my fault. But I'm pissed off because I didn't plan for that to happen. And I'm always fucking against the gun trying to get to work on time. It's like, how do we get here?
I
How
love
do we get here?
that part. I think that part right there speaks volumes to how important habits and routines are. And and here's the other honest part. Sometimes I think we can also, and this leads into another question I was gonna ask. I think we can get to a point where once you've kind of like up leveled and you figured something out, eventually you get to a point where you start feeling probably a little bored, right? And maybe you're waiting for the next set of results. Maybe you're waiting for, the next client to sign up. Maybe you're waiting for the next milestone, whatever that looks like. And in the waiting of it, you get impatient, right? And I think when we get bored, we start taking for granted the effectiveness of those habits and routines, right? And like by sticking solid to those, it's not so much about how significant it is in this one moment or this one day, but like you said, you don't know what's going to happen unexpectedly next. But by sticking to these habits and routines, you are ensuring that the big shit, the most important stuff, the things that are going to hold you like grounded and center, those things are going to happen. And then when the unknown comes in, right, and like tornadoes through your freaking schedule and your life, you're able to weather that storm because you've already got this other stuff on lock, right? Um, But would you say, so going into turning this into a question for you then, would you say that, like, if you just kind of look back to times like this when you started to feel busy or you started to feel that frustration, in hindsight, did the boredom come before a breakthrough? Like, maybe it was I mean, just because you and I like lift, so that's what I'm always like going towards. When I get bored in my workouts, like yesterday, I forget what the move was, but I was looking at my little tracker and I looked at what my weights were for like the same time last week when I did this workout. And I was like, oh, I feel like that might be like a little light. So I paused my workout, and then I have adjustable dumbbells that go up to 50, you know? And so I put it on what it was last week, and I was like, oh no, that's stupid. And so then I went up like, I don't know, 5 or 10 pounds. And then I started doing it. I was like, oh, okay. Right. And it was exciting because I was able, like, you can't go up every time. Like there's sometimes you got to just stick with the weights. But sometimes does the boredom come before a breakthrough for you? Like, have you seen that? Is that just me kind of getting lost in la la land a little bit this morning? But for me, at least, I feel like that might be the case.
I would say yes and no, because sometimes it feels like you and I were talking off camera here before. I just had a fucking weird week. Like, just unmotivated, feeling like I'm filling everybody else's cups and nobody's filling mine, and just procrastinating on a lot of stuff. Didn't feel like I was super productive. Um, just this heavy feeling. And that heavy feeling in the past has been kind of the precursor to me quitting on a lot of things, where I've made quitting not an option anymore. So sorry guys, that's not going to happen. But anyways, you start to, it's almost like two steps forward but one step back.
Yeah.
And these weeks, there's no rhyme or reason to it. Like, why? You start to try and depict why. And the only thing I can come up with is not taking action.
Mm-hmm.
The things that typically have helped me actually be able to have those breakthroughs, as you call it. There's Andy Frisella has a podcast, very successful supplement owner or supplement company owner. He's in a bunch of stuff. Pretty intense dude, but he has something that he calls the power list. And the power list is super stupid simple. It's just causes you to execute. Again, that big word that we use all the time. And so basically, his power list is write down 5 things, and they're not 5 things that you do on the daily. So, like, if you work out daily, that doesn't count as your power list, but
Yeah.
5 critical tasks that you need to implement that's going to help get you closer to your goal with your business, your goal personally, whatever it is. And if you can knock out those 5 tasks every single day, then we'll see where you are in a month, right? And
Yeah.
it's that execution to a game plan, because like most people, when they get back into the gym, they want to do they want to lose 20 pounds in one workout. And
Okay.
so they're like, "Oh, that wasn't hard enough. I need like 3 hours in here so I can burn that just wasn't enough." And then they're sore as fuck 2 days later, and then they quit. And it's like, well, I don't need you to do 3 hour workouts to do my program. My program, the workouts are simple. They're stupid simple. And I actually had one of my clients who I'm working with the other day. She was like, I realized something. I'm like, what's that? She's like, I realize this is more mental than it is physical. I'm like, fucking A, it is, because
Yes.
I don't need you to work out for 2 hours. I need
No.
you to work out for 45 minutes. I need you to do these movements, do them each day, which is already hard enough,
Mhm.
and then focus on the game plan. And if you can execute on those tasks and that power list that you create for yourself, you start to see breakthroughs, you start to see success. But again, that busyness gets in, and now you start to choose the easier, more unimportant tasks. Why do we do that? What's the mental reasoning behind that? I I'm not sure that I know, other than just distraction and drifting.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of it too. When I think back to our former lives as ag educators, there's so much that's predetermined and dictated. You'd have a certain level of self-agency, in your classroom and whatever approach you wanted to take with the content that you were teaching. But the state, national, regional calendars, that's, I mean, to a certain extent, at your sectional meetings, your regional supervisor would kind of touch base and make sure, like, hey, this is what I have on the calendar, does this work, do we need to shift the day? But for the most part, like, it's happening about the same time every single year, right? Your bell schedule, the FFA event calendar, CDEs, LDEs, all that stuff, like, it's this big universe and we're just like a little cog that's part of it. But it's dictated to us, right? And so then when those busiest times of the year, like right now for ag teachers, okay, when that time comes, it almost just feels like this, like a whirling dervish, and it's almost like you can't spot, you can't see straight. You're just trying to like stay with the momentum of everybody else so that you don't get flung out and hurt. As you were talking, I was trying to brainstorm quickly, and I don't know what would come to mind for you, but you mentioned that power list and the ability to execute on a plan. I wonder how many ag teachers, let alone how many departments, actually have a unified game plan. And if they did, like, what types of actions, what types of tasks would you suggest they put on their power list?
One of the new teacher, maybe it was the student teacher conclave, they had some younger ag teachers come speak at that. And I think I've talked about this before. Some of them were really enlightening, and others I'm like, okay, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Anyways, one of the things I remember somebody saying specifically was, um, right, he writes a list on the board, and that board is, I mean, he's got this big list, and he's like, if you try to get through it all in a day, you're just not going to get through it. But just being able to cross stuff off as you go, and that list just continues to grow. Weirdly enough, as a man, I am not a good list guy. Like, crossing shit off a list is not my thing. I am goal oriented. I need to achieve something. I need to hunt. I need to kill something, right? Like the natural inclination. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really difficult to sit there, and that's what my current job is. A lot of times, crossing shit off a list. I did this, I did that. This customer's is taken care of. Need to call him. Blah blah blah. It's just kind of monotonous in a way. So when you think about a list, you got to think about the people that you're working with and what drives them. Every department's going to be a little bit different in terms of what that list looks like because there's different aspects to different departments. Are you in a single person department? I mean, obviously, then you're just making a list for yourself, but are you in a three-person department? Are you in a eight-person department? And that kind of changes things. But I mean, as a department, when you sit down to do and at Madera, we did this, once a year, but it was making goals, setting like basically a calendar schedule for what our next year is going to look like. At that point, maybe coming up and bringing up some goals, and then what tasks do each of us need to fulfill to reach those goals? Because in the grand scheme of thing, you're going to have personal goals. And for many of us, that's contest related, proficiency, record book related, fair related, as we've talked about earlier. Um, and then we have to have department goals too. Are we trying to win small department of the year or whatever it is for the regional meetings? Are we, trying to have the most state degrees? Like whatever that looks like, what is it going to require for each person or the department as a whole? And then coming up with those tasks. So I guess I didn't really give anything specific in terms of that question because it's going to vary.
Yeah.
However, those are just ideas that I have in terms of what I think works. And I think if you have those meetings, or maybe, monthly meetings at least, where there's a check-in, like, hey, how are we doing on this? We set this goal for ourselves. Are we getting closer? Are we moving further away? And then incentivizing it, you know. If there's an incentive, if there's a result at the end of it, you're going to be more willing to persevere and do those tasks to get yourself to that goal.
Yeah. Man, the stuff I've done for a this is gonna come out. The stuff I've done for a free sweatshirt, right? Or like we've set goals on our coaching team before. And one of the times that I first earned an invitation to like a training retreat, I was building my business, but I wasn't even, this speaks a lot to my personality. I wasn't even the most excited about building my business. I was the most excited that the way in which I built my business got me invited to the retreat. Cause I want to be in the rooms. I want to be with the people. I want to have like a seat at the table, you know? And so like, I look back on it and I'm like, Colleen, you're so stupid. You're so dumb. Like you did this really huge, big thing that was significant for me in my business, but I didn't even like give that part that much credit. I didn't even celebrate it that much. I was so freaking excited about the incentive,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And like you said, I think you can personalize that for each department. And I think taking some of the strategies that we employ in the classroom, reverse planning, reverse engineering your week. If you've got some targets that you want your students to hit, right? Like deciding where you want them to end up by Friday and then backtracking and figuring out how many times, how many times do your students need to interact with that curriculum and how many ways leading up to that point so that they can build the model or ace the test or whatever it is that's going to culminate for them at the end of the week. Same can be done for departments. If it's a goal to be recognized at that level as like outstanding 2 to 3 person department or whatever the case may be, then like you said, that should be like a team approach. And what if you deconstructed that bad boy and during your monthly meetings, you're checking in on different components of that application so that it's not falling on the shoulders of, one person and then the other person that like gets all the pictures together and all that kind of stuff. Working smarter, not harder. You know what I mean?
Right. Divide and conquer. And
Yeah.
that's where you have to delegate, because within a department, and again, I go back to that power list, right? And I don't know if I kind of tied everything in earlier, but like the people that start their workout routine again, or they're starting this workout program and they think they need to work out for 3 hours on that first day. What you do is that's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And so after, you do that for 1 or 2 days, you're sore as hell, you're tired, your mind goes back to that place of like, I can't do this, man. And then you quit. And
Mm-hmm.
so what I found is with my power list, if I write down 5 things, and again, I'm not great at the power list, it's something that I need to do a much better job at. But when I write down 5 things,
Mm-hmm.
those 5 things are attainable if
Yeah.
I focus, if I decide not to be busy and more so productive.
Yep.
Excuse me. Some days though, like when I haven't done the power list in a while and now I write down all my shit on a Sunday or Monday, I got like 10 fucking items on there for Monday. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, moving right along. And then you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I did 7. That's pretty good. I didn't make all of them,
Yeah.
but that's okay. Or maybe you do hit all of them and you're like, the next day you're
Well,
like, man, I'm tired.
and let's normalize for a second, because I feel like especially in the ag ed world, we get really sucked into like all or nothing. You either won or you lost. It's black or it's white. There's no room for any of the growth or the progress that happens in between.
Hmm.
And when you find yourself in a busy season, when you find yourself getting so freaking burnout, overworked, frustrated, whatever, like you're hitting your head against the wall, normalize doing something. A something day is better than a nothing day, right? Perfection doesn't exist. It's the lowest standard we can set for ourselves, right? But when we're busy, okay, whether it's your what do you call it? Your list?
The power list.
Thank you. The power list. Okay. You say power list, and I'm thinking about my Friday finishers, I'm thinking about like needle movers. Those are like other terms that like come to my mind. Decide what those are and do something, because then in the moment, like what's happening, and we've talked about this before, you are showing your brain and allowing it the opportunity to experience a teensy tiny little bit of success and rebuilding trust with yourself that you do the things you say you're going to do. And every time you're able to check something off that list, your power list, your Friday finishers, whatever it is, but decide a small handful of things that are most going to move the needle forward towards your goals, personal or department wide. Take action on those things and let that be what kind of springboards you forward just a little bit. It doesn't have to be massive. It doesn't have to be, like you said, a 3-hour workout, right? That gets you massive results. The most significant results I've ever had are from the littlest things that I do on a consistent basis, right? And that's
over time.
Yeah, compounded over time. That's the mind F right there. And when people get it, like your client, it's next level.
Well, you can only go so hard for so long.
Right.
Like it really is. It's not sustainable. There are some freaks in the world that can run like 13 miles a day and lift and do all these other things. And I'm like, dude, I envy that. I would love to be able to do that. But most people, I don't think, at least, maybe I need to try to put this to the test for myself, but most people, that's kind of stuff is not sustainable. Like if you think you're going to get it all done in one day, well, then the next day there's going to be another list of shit and you're going to have to attack that too. And it's just it gets tiring. And then you have, as you talked about earlier, these unforeseen circumstances that in a way we create for ourselves in my opinion, but it's through rushing and putting ourselves in situations where we could have done this beforehand, right? Um, but the point I'm trying to make is that, if you just execute on the task at hand, the little things, doing those right, and like we talked about again earlier before we hit record, was if you're building a house or a statue or something, having a foundation. Well, what does that foundation look like? Well, I and yourself, and yours looks a little different than mine, I'm sure, but have built a foundation through habits, routines, rituals.
Yep.
So where as I build upward to try and construct this house or statue, whatever you want to call it, I still have a good base. I have a solid foundation. So when the wind picks up and blows that bitch down to the ground, I still land on that base. I still have that foundation piece versus the alternative where people who are just kind of going through the motions of life and are focused on these other things that are not as crucial to their personal development or their professional development, they keep falling back down to the dirt, back down to square one. Well, that is not a good foundation for you. You have to build that foundational piece to make sure that you're not falling all the way back to square one, because that's the biggest issue. And then that's like I'll start again on Monday. Like, no, you fucking won't. Because when you're going back to square one, that's that mentality that you set for yourself. Opposed to, I screwed up today, or I didn't cross off everything on my list today. I'm going to get back on it the next morning or tonight. I'm going to finish this, and just making that a priority instead of the alternative. And again, I'm not acting like I'm a professional here, because this is something that I really suck at, and that's why I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
I'm putting myself out to dry right now, but that's just the truth. Once I figure that out, watch me grow. Like it's going to be impressive.
And it reminds me of something that my speaking mentor, something that he said a few years ago, and he actually turned it into, his name's Kevin Bracey. He's, well, local, but also like national speaker. Very, very well known in California, especially like across different levels of schools and educational facilities. But anyway, here in Elk Grove, just for fun, because he likes staying connected with people, he used to lead a spin class at our gym. And he partnered with the gym to incorporate some like personal development mindset stuff, while they work towards like this goal of completing like a physical fitness kind of program. Anyway, he had spoken at the school that I was still teaching at, which is how I initially heard about this Win the Week challenge. Of course, I signed up, and I still have the t-shirt, because I like an incentive. But it was the Win the Week challenge. And what really stood out to me were the types of strategies that he talked about, habits like you and I have talked about, but the mindset behind how do you win your day and how you win your week. And he would say that the day's not over until you've won your day, right? It could be 5:30 p.m. It could be 12:01 a.m. It doesn't matter what time it is. You might have started on Monday. Theoretically, it could be like Tuesday, but your day's not over until you've won your day. And so what is one thing that you can do that once you've done that, once you've accomplished that task, you qualify your day as being won, right? And it started to just kind of change my mindset a little bit because, like you said, whether it's your power list, whether it's the laundry list of stuff that you've got to get done in the spring semester as an ag teacher, it's always like there's always going to be stuff there. Even when you get on better footing and you start being more productive, like you're just going to open yourself up to probably like a bigger list with like higher priorities and other stuff. And I think just shifting your mindset a little bit to the reasoning behind why you're checking those things off, the value behind it, the impact, the who's being impacted by the actions that you're taking. When I do a better job of tapping in to that part of it, I find it easier for myself to stay productive and to stay out of the busy space because I'm attaching that action to the people that I'm serving or the people that I'm influencing. Sometimes it's my own kids. Sometimes it's the clients that I'm working with. But even amidst like your busiest seasons, when your schedule and other things are dictated to you, it is still possible to win your day, But I think, like you said, being able to build in habits and routines that are built on that foundation, right? It's just, it's having those mechanisms in place so that you can kind of self-assess and like autocorrect as opposed to needing to completely unravel and then do this kind of self-care that is way more disruptive and, like kind of gets in the way, if that makes sense.
Right. No, and I think we can beat this horse to death, but it's you're not going to win a championship because of one practice.
No.
Like, Alabama, and I don't give a shit about college football as much, other
Yeah.
than I like to see Fresno State do well. But Alabama's had Nick Saban as a coach for a long time. Speaking of Fresno State, Kalen DeBoer is now their head coach, so good for him. But Nick Saban's big thing was like, no, you do this right. Like in practice, we're gonna run this play until we get it fucking right. And so repetition of those things and doing those things repeatedly, and whether it be the power list, whether it be reading 10 pages a day, all of these things that can help us personally and on a professional level, executing on those tasks is going over time, those small tasks over time is going to show you the results that you want. The championship is won over the course of an entire season. And it's the same for those coaching CDE teams.
Yep.
You know, the last week before state finals, it was like, we're gonna cram all this shit in and like we're gonna do a mock like contest, and I would pull my kids out for the day and get a sub, and I was in the shop with them all day going through this stuff. I honestly don't know if that was beneficial because, as we all know, that cramming piece the day before state finals, and it's like, did I just put them on overload? Like, did I fuck this up for them? And I will take responsibility for that all day. I'm not sure it was productive, but those practices when I didn't give my best effort, when I didn't set up the stations I needed to set up or prepare the materials that I needed for my team that I needed them to go over and get better at due to being weak there in other contests, that's where we lost. We lost those days. And so, to your point, it's executing on those tasks daily. And if you can make that list for yourself, see what that looks like, and then think about the long-term effects of that and doing those things, and then just doing them repeatedly, day in, day out, without uh what's the word? Excuse me, without like question, just getting them done and being that person. And I'm giving myself, this is me giving
We're
myself advice.
coaching ourselves, okay?
Yes, yes.
That's the truth. Yeah. So to kind of bring this to a close, I think that's a powerful place for us to kind of bring this to an end, but a call to action, right? Couple of things. For those of you watching and listening, take take our advice, because I'm telling, like, I'm going to go downstairs and I'm making my list of 5 things right now, so that I can have it like in my workspace and look at it. I think that's phenomenal. Regardless of what size department you work in, do this task for yourself today, right now, whenever it is you're watching it. I don't care if it's, for us, I mean, you're going to see this on a Monday, probably, maybe later in the week. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's February 27th or March 1st when you watch it. You're going to take some time, sit down, come up with those 5 tasks, 5 actions that you can take that are going to move the needle forward, right? And get you in that productive space, right? So that we can leave busyness behind. We're about being productive. We're not going to procrastinate anymore. That's your first call to action. Second call to action. If you want us to elaborate or go more in depth in anything that we've talked about so far today or in a prior episode, drop it in the comments. We would love to answer your questions. If there are topics you would like us to cover, reach out directly, because I know some of y'all don't want your names attached to it. Okay, you're afraid of who else is watching and reporting back to the powers that be. But we so appreciate those of you that have been watching consistently. We see the views that are going up, but please like the video, subscribe to the channel so that we know we're going in the right direction. And if you know somebody who would benefit from this message, share the link with them and tell them to share it with all their friends. But with that, have a great day. We're going to see you next time.